Right now, a full-time job is no longer enough for a lot of people in the United States. Not to get ahead, not to build anything, not even to feel stable, just to keep up. And the numbers do not look extreme at first glance. Employment is still relatively strong, income is still coming in. But when you actually look at where that money goes, how it is used, what it is already committed to before the month even starts, a different picture begins to emerge. One person opened their electric bill expecting it to be high. The previous month had already come in above $500, so they were braced for another increase. This time, it crossed $600. What stood out was not just the total, it was the detail underneath it. Their usage had actually gone down compared to the same period the previous year. They had used less and paid more. That gap between what people are doing and what they are paying is showing up in category after category right now. Average weekly earnings for full-time workers in the United States sit around $1,200. On the surface, that sounds stable. It suggests that basic expenses should be manageable with something left over. But that assumption starts to fall apart the moment you trace how that income actually moves through a real household. One worker described picking up a second job recently not to build savings, not to move ahead, but simply to keep up with bills that used to fit inside a single paycheck. Nothing about their life had changed in a meaningful way. Same apartment, same habits, no major new expenses. The margin was just gone. And that detail matters more than the income number itself. Because the shift is not about whether people are earning, it is about how much of what they earn is already committed before the month even begins. Part 1, the income is there, but it's already gone. Living paycheck to paycheck does not mean unemployed. It does not mean making poor decisions. For a growing number of people, it simply means the buffer is thin, and a thin buffer is what determines whether a small disruption stays manageable or becomes a problem. The structure of a typical monthly budget reveals why. Rent is fixed. Insurance payments come out automatically. Car payments, subscriptions, minimum balances on credit cards, all of it gets accounted for before any flexibility exists. By the time those obligations are covered, what remains is not discretionary income. It is whatever is left, and that amount is shrinking. This is where the mismatch becomes important. Income tends to adjust slowly. A raise, when it happens, is incremental a few percent over a year, but expenses do not follow that same pattern. Rent can increase sharply within a single lease cycle. Insurance premiums can jump at renewal with no change in personal behavior. A utility bill can spike in a single month. These costs move first, and income catches up later if it catches up at all. Some will point to wage growth as evidence that things are improving. And in nominal terms, wages have risen. But that argument only holds if the costs they are measured against remain stable. When housing, utilities, insurance, and everyday expenses all increase at the same time, nominal wage growth does not create progress. It maintains position, and sometimes it does not even manage that. More of each paycheck is already spoken for before it arrives. Less flexibility, less control, less room for error. And once that becomes the baseline, the next unexpected expense hits harder than it should not, because the expense itself is extreme, but because there is nothing left to absorb it with. Part 2, housing, where the pressure becomes visible. For most people, housing is where the financial pressure becomes most visible and most difficult to address. The national average rent sits around $2,000, but that number alone does not capture the real situation. What matters more is the ratio. How much of someone's total income housing actually consumes once everything is included? A renter in Georgia broke down their actual monthly costs after signing a lease. The base rent looked manageable at the start, something that could fit within a budget with some planning. But then the additional charges began to layer in. A required internet package bundled into the lease, a trash fee that could not be removed, parking costs, then utilities on top of that. By the time everything was counted, the actual monthly total had moved into the $1,600 to $1,700 range for a basic apartment, not high-end housing, just a standard rental. The listed price and the real price were not the same. This pattern shows up broadly. The advertised rent is often just the starting point. The actual cost of living in that space ends up higher, more rigid, and less transparent than it appeared at signing. These additional charges are not optional, and they are rarely prominently disclosed before a decision is made. Financial guidelines have long suggested that housing should take up no more than roughly 30% of income, leaving room for other expenses and some level of savings. For a growing number of renters, that threshold is no longer achievable. Housing now takes a meaningfully larger share, which compresses every other category. And once that compression happens, flexibility disappears. Moving is often offered as the obvious solution. But relocating comes with its own costs, deposits, application fees, moving expenses, and the uncertainty of landing somewhere cheaper when prices are rising across multiple areas simultaneously. In many cases, moving shifts the problem rather than resolving it, and in the meantime, rent can increase within a single lease cycle while income adjusts far more slowly. That mismatch costs moving quickly, earnings catching up gradually is what forces people to absorb higher housing expenses without a corresponding increase in what they bring in. Part 3: Utilities. The unpredictability that breaks budgeting. If housing sets the baseline of a monthly budget, utilities are where the unpredictability begins. Electricity, heating, water, gas, none of these are optional. They are required just to maintain basic living conditions, and unlike rent, they do not stay consistent from month to month. That variability is part of what makes them particularly hard to manage. The household that opened a bill over $600 after already paying above $500 the previous month is not an isolated case. What made it notable was not just the size, it was that their usage had actually decreased compared to the same period the year before. They had used less energy and paid more for it. That experience is becoming more common because utility costs are not driven only by consumption. They are driven by how energy is priced and delivered base charges that apply regardless of usage, distribution fees, adjustment components, and rate structures that most customers never look at until the total becomes hard to ignore. This breaks a basic assumption that most people hold about their spending. If I use less, I should pay less. When that relationship no longer holds reliably, cost control becomes genuinely difficult. You can lower the thermostat, reduce usage, shift activity to off-peak hours, but there is a floor to how much can be cut. At some point, what remains is simply what is required to function. That is where the frustration concentrates. There is also a timing problem that compounds the pressure. A utility bill can spike significantly within a single billing cycle with very little warning. One month is manageable, the next month is materially higher. Unlike rent, which at least comes with a lease agreement that provides some advance notice of changes, utility variation is harder to anticipate and harder to plan around. And unlike discretionary spending, utilities cannot be paused. They are foundational costs that must be paid regardless of how the rest of the budget is performing. When that level of unpredictability sits on top of already high housing costs, the two pressures compound each other quickly. Part 4: Insurance. The cost nobody watches until it explodes. Insurance is one of the least visible costs in a monthly budget and one of the fastest growing. It tends to get processed automatically, often in the background, which makes it easier to overlook until the renewal arrives and the number has changed significantly. One person described their car insurance jumping from under $200 a month to roughly $700. No accidents, no major claims, no meaningful change in their personal driving situation. Just a new premium that took effect at renewal. That kind of increase is not universal, but it reflects a broader pattern that is becoming harder to dismiss. Insurance pricing does not operate at the individual level alone. It reflects system-wide conditions. Repair costs are up, medical costs have risen, weather-related damage has become more frequent and more expensive. When the underlying costs that insurers are covering increase, pricing gets adjusted across large groups of customers. That means individuals can end up paying significantly more even when nothing about their own circumstances has changed. Health insurance follows a similar pattern. Premiums have been rising over time. Deductibles have increased. Out-of-pocket costs have gone up. The result is a situation where people are paying more both to maintain coverage and to actually use it when they need care. There is no clean way to reduce this expense without accepting meaningful trade-offs. Lower premiums typically mean higher risk exposure. Better coverage means higher monthly costs. Every adjustment in one direction creates a vulnerability in another. What makes insurance pressure particularly difficult to manage is that it is structurally built into daily life. Owning a car requires coverage. Renting or owning a home typically requires coverage. Health insurance is tied to employment or purchased privately. These are not isolated expenses, they are embedded in the architecture of how modern life is organized. When they become more expensive, the pressure does not stay contained to a single budget line. It ripples across multiple areas at once. And because it builds quietly between renewals, it tends to reach a point where it suddenly feels overwhelming rather than giving any gradual sense of accumulation. Part 5: Everyday Spending, the slow pattern that reshapes everything. Beyond the large fixed categories, the pressure also shows up in something harder to pin down: the ordinary routine purchases that most people used to make without thinking. A quick stop at a store, a simple meal, filling up the gas tank. None of these are financial decisions in any significant sense, but the total cost attached to them has shifted enough to change how people approach them. One person walked into a pharmacy to pick up a few basic items: shampoo, toilet paper, and a greeting card. The total came out above $70. The reaction was not just surprise at the number, it was the disconnect between what was purchased and what it cost. Nothing unusual, nothing premium, just standard household items at a price that once would have applied to a larger or more deliberate shopping trip. Another example came from a simple meal: a sandwich and a small add-on, no drink, no extras, coming close to $20. That kind of price used to describe a full sit-down experience, not a quick stop on the way somewhere. The transaction felt wrong in proportion not because the price was impossible, but because it no longer matched what the purchase was supposed to represent. Individually, these moments do not define a financial situation, but together, consistently, they begin to reshape it. It is not one large expense that forces a change. It is a series of smaller increases spread across the entire month: groceries up a bit, gas trending higher, household items no longer as cheap as they once were. A single large purchase can be planned and budgeted for. A steady increase across dozens of small transactions is harder to track and almost impossible to absorb strategically. This is where behavior starts to shift in ways that feel subtle but are actually significant. Eating out becomes less frequent. Shopping becomes more deliberate. Trips are combined to reduce gas. Small choices start to carry weight that they did not used to carry, not because people want them to, but because the budget now requires that level of attention. And alongside the behavioral shift, there is a mental one. Prices are no longer something people notice occasionally. They become something people track constantly. Every purchase becomes a small decision point. Over time, that constant awareness adds a different kind of pressure, not just financial, but psychological. The question is no longer just whether something is affordable, it is whether it feels worth it. And when that question starts appearing regularly, it signals that something in the underlying financial situation has genuinely changed. Part 6: Debt, the layer underneath everything. All of the costs described so far would be difficult enough on their own, but they are not happening against a clean baseline. For most households, they are layered on top of something that already exists: debt. Monthly budgets are not built from zero. They are built on top of obligations taken on in the past that still need to be paid today. Credit cards, auto loans, student loans, mortgages. Each of these carries a fixed payment that does not adjust when other expenses rise. Every new cost has to fit around them, which leaves less room with each passing month. The past is always present in a budget, and it does not shrink just because the present gets more expensive. One person described having to cash out a portion of their retirement savings just to cover current expenses, not to make a major purchase, not to invest in anything, just to keep up with bills that had gradually moved beyond what their income could support. That decision solves a short-term problem while creating a long-term cost. It is an example of how pressure builds through compounding decisions rather than a single failure. The structure follows a recognizable pattern. Higher costs tighten the budget. A tighter budget leads to more reliance on credit. That reliance increases future fixed obligations, which reduces flexibility further. More of each paycheck goes toward past decisions instead of current needs. The margin gets thinner. And at some point, even small new increases start to matter more than they should, not because they are extreme on their own, but because there is no cushion left to absorb them. Small disruptions that would have been manageable a few years ago now land harder, stay longer, and require more effort to recover from. Debt also changes how people think about money in ways that are harder to quantify. It adds a persistent awareness of what is owed, not just what is being spent. That affects decisions in subtle ways: hesitation, delayed purchases, a kind of background stress that does not go away, even when income is still coming in. When that mindset combines with rising costs across housing, utilities, insurance, and everyday spending, the effect compounds. People are no longer just managing the present. They are managing the present while carrying the weight of the past. And that combination changes what financial stability actually feels like from the inside. Conclusion: when you look at any one of these categories in isolation, it is possible to explain it away. Housing has always been a major expense. Utilities have always fluctuated. Insurance has always increased over time. Everyday prices have always shifted. None of these facts are new. What is different now is that all of them are moving at the same time, in the same direction, at a pace that income is not keeping up with. The combination is what changes the experience, not any single category, but the cumulative effect of several categories compressing the budget from multiple directions simultaneously. From a broader economic perspective, some indicators still look stable. Employment is relatively strong, wages have grown in nominal terms. The overall economy has not collapsed. Those data points are real, and they matter. But stability at the macro level does not translate automatically into stability at the household level. A job does not guarantee financial security. Nominal wage growth does not create breathing room if the costs it is measured against are rising at the same time or faster. The system can appear to be functioning while the people operating inside it feel progressively more constrained. That is the disconnect. It is not that income has disappeared. It is that more of that income is already committed before it arrives. Fixed costs take a larger share. Variable costs are harder to predict. Flexibility, the thing that allows people to absorb disruption and stay stable, is shrinking. And once flexibility disappears, the situation stops being about managing money better. It becomes about whether the current structure of costs and income still works for the people living inside it. Managing money in this environment requires more attention, more adjustment, and more trade-offs than it did before. That is not a perception or a failure of discipline. It is a structural shift in what it takes just to stay in place. The question worth sitting with is simple. What expense has changed the most for you in the past year, and how has it changed the way you make decisions every month? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment and subscribe.